Civilization games are my gaming paradox. I love the idea of building a new civilization up from scratch and developing it the way I want to. But given how deep Civ games tend to be, and how many hundreds of hours it takes to explore them fully, the prospect of actually doing that has always terrified me.
Welcome to Imagine Earth Limited.
Imagine Earth looks to offer a far more accessible experience with its colourful art style and simplified interface. But does it have enough depth to do justice to the genre? In my opinion, not quite yet, and it has some serious issues that need addressing before I could really recommend Imagine Earth as a purchase. Currently in early access on Steam, only 3 levels or planets are available right now, with all the other game modes locked off until they've been developed. So there's not a huge amount to go on here. However, the game does a good job of introducing you to its systems and the interface with the tutorial world and its subsequent levels. It's clear that there's a lot of time been spent here making the first impression of Imagine Earth pretty good, and the colourful visuals certainly do the trick. The campaign sees you taking on the task of colonising planets on behalf of an interstellar corporation, balancing their demands against sustainable development, which means basically don't boil the planet, you fool. Accessibility is Imagine Earth's primary focus, as gameplay elements are boiled down to the most basic constituents you can imagine. You'll have 4 jobs to do when building your new civilization: to provide housing to increase your population, food to keep them alive, factories to produce money, and energy to power all of those creations. The planets I played were divided up into segments, but they were never big enough to design intricate or particularly ordered cities, so it's a case of shoving whatever you need, wherever you can, to get the job done. Although different buildings can affect other ones negatively, like housing next to power stations for example, oftentimes there's no choice, and demolishing and rebuilding things to make them pleasing to the eye can easily sabotage the planet you're on, and your civilization entirely if you're not careful. There's a bit of variety with what you can build that comes with unlocking more of the research tree. These need unlocking with coins before you can buy them, part of the in-game currency that you're rewarded with for achieving certain goals. As I progressed, alternatives to coal power stations were unlocked, and similar industry upgrades occur across nearly all the structures you can build. It has a good sense of progression, and comes with various trade-offs. Do you preserve the fishing population with reduced food income in order to keep that food source going for longer? Or just slash and burn it all for a short-term game? This leads on to the game's core mechanic, which puts the health of the environment above and beyond nearly every other aspect of the game. It's where Imagine Earth gets its unique take on the planet sim, but it's also where some major problems lie. First off, there's pollution, and your power stations are going to be the real bad boys here. They need constant decontamination to avoid damage and stop the spread of pollution affecting other parts of the map. It's good that that level of responsibility comes with energy generation, and later on in the game, recycling plants can keep pollution levels down without you having to manually click on structures. But until then, or if you don't have enough coins to unlock that research or space to build them, you're going to be doing this every few minutes. Guess what? It isn't fun at all. The other element is the temperature of the planet, which, for certain reasons, rises as you build more power stations or factories, or generally as you develop as a whole. You can unlock upgrades and research that help to keep this number down, but in order to avoid any direct negative result of your presence there on a planet, it requires a lot of time and a lot of planning. I actually liked this mechanic and took great pleasure in slowly replacing my oil rigs with wind power, not least because I didn't have to click on them every 5 minutes to decontaminate them. What irritated me though was the seemingly one-way path this mechanic went. The planet always warmed up as my colonisation progressed, which meant that the polar caps melted, which meant that there was less land to develop, and any coastal structures I had would get destroyed. As Imagine Earth's early levels are so small, just a few buildings being damaged like this leads to a cascade of disasters that are nearly impossible to recover from. Climate change in reality isn't one way, and I don't really like how directly correlated Imagine Earth portrays a complex system that may or may not have anything to do with current human industry. It would have been good to have an element of global cooling to offset the scale, with perhaps encroaching ice glaciers as an antithesis to rising sea levels. But there is a strategy to deal with the flooding, and it was easy to discover after a few planet overscreens. But executing it meant changing the way that you'd like to build your planet, and it meant sticking with a set plan of replacing more warming tech the moment you research it. That's fine, and it teaches that a short-term game almost always comes at a longer-term cost, but it makes the experience feel a lot more drawn out than I think it should. And here's the rub. Each civilization I built felt moulded to a particular type, the same type that everyone else is probably building to get through a level. So there's no sense of ownership or individuality to the creation. It had to conform to what the systems in place were demanding. Maybe this will change as they make bigger planets, and it looks to be the developer's aim as the campaign progresses. A larger world here could alleviate nearly all of my concerns, so I have to refrain from being a little bit too critical. Imagine Earth looks like an interesting prospect, and the emphasis on the planet's ecology is a welcome step. I like the idea of a super accessible version of civilization, but it does need a bit more depth to the systems that the game uses. And it needs to make you feel like you're creating something unique, not just a similar version to what everyone else must be building. You can download the demo right now, or you can pay for early access, but honestly, I'd wait for a bit more substance to arrive before committing to a purchase.